Hello and welcome back to another draft video. The draft is upon us. It is very, 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 very soon. So I wanted to go over my top defensive linemen in this draft. So I've looked at the top 15 edge rushers and the top 15 defensive line interior players, that is, and I'm going to see how they compare to each other, both within the position and combined, because there are plenty of teams out there that need an interior defender and need an edge rusher, because it turns out the teams that don't prioritize edge rushers tend to also not prioritize interior players, and then they tend to feel the effects of that all at once. So we're going to take a look at both of these lists. Please like and subscribe if you liked what you have seen, and I will be covering the draft all 3 days, all through the process as best as I am able to do. So starting with the edge rushers, I'm going to read through the list from the bottom to the top. So at number 15, Romello Height, 14, LT Overton, 13, Kieran Crawford, 12, Derek Moore, 11, Joshua Josephs, 10, Malachi Lawrence, 9, Cassius Howell, 8, Zion Young, 7, Gabe Akis, 6, Keldrick Falk, 5, R. Mason Thomas, 4, TJ Parker, 3, Akeem Messidor, 2, Ruben Bain, and 1, David Bailey. I finally have set on that I'm putting David Bailey above Ruben Bain. It's so close. I continuously went back and forth, but ultimately I decided that is where I want to land. To be clear, everyone on this list is someone I have as a top 100 player. If you want someone on this list, your team is going to have to pick them in the first 3 rounds, probably, and maybe the first 4 rounds. Now, some of them could fall because of traits, because of perceived flaws, things like that. I understand there are some that I'm higher on than NFL teams might be, but all it takes is one team to believe in a guy and then they're gone, and then other teams are afraid of a run, so a run starts, so keep that in mind, that if your team doesn't take an edge in the first 3 rounds, there's a solid chance you don't get any of these guys. So that being said, I'm sticking with David Bailey at number 1. I just love the play style. I think he is going to hit very early on in his career. You'll notice that I have moved Keldrick Falk down. I think I was leaning too much on potential, too much on traits, and not enough on film and production. And, I think with edge rushers, because in previous years I didn't spend a lot of time watching them, I didn't feel as confident in my evaluation. I leaned more on the consensus. And at this stage, it's time to have conviction around your picks. So I've moved him down a little bit. I have him at number 6. I moved Akeem Messidor up. I think I was just too biased because of his age, but he is so pro-ready right now, and he can kick inside, so he has that versatility. You're basically getting an edge rusher in their prime years for a rookie paycheck. I mean, he played for 6 years in college. This is someone who has a very mature perspective, and I just think he is going to make an impact right away. He should go to a team, ideally, that is entering their Super Bowl window right now, so that they can get the value of what he's going to bring you and, maybe go and win some playoff games with it. And then who knows, maybe he walks away and you get a comp pick for it. That's fine. I think draft windows and the window of victory is shortening because of owners being impatient. And so the way I see it, you got to look at the next 4 years as your priority. And my moving Akeem Messidor up reflects that. So that being said, Malachi Lawrence is someone who you'll notice is on this list, and he was someone who was just outside of my top 10 before. And I moved him up because toward the end of the season, on the film rewatch also, he impressed me a lot, and I think he's someone who I just think teams are going to be more willing to take a chance on him than some others. And, I think his pass rush is so versatile. I think he has great traits, very explosive. I can't move him higher than this because he's weak against the run, and I can't move someone higher who isn't a complete edge. The role of an edge 3 player, an edge 4 player even, has changed. Like, they need to be able to do everything, because I think largely because of Jesse Minter, a lot of teams now want to have 3 edge rushers on at once. And so do you have someone who can rush in the interior? That requires a slightly different skill set. Do you have someone who can rush in the exterior? So if you're going to do that and you're going to have that rotation, ideally, you're going to need to give edge rushers breaks more. And so, do you know what I mean? Like, the way the math adds up, you need people who can stop the run. And so that just kind of limits how high I can put him because he's a purely situational player. TJ Parker, you'll notice he only moved down 1 spot, but I no longer have a first round grade on him. I have a very high second round grade, at least a pretty high second round grade, but I no longer see him as the, sure to go in the first round kind of guy. He probably will because of how weak the draft is in general. I think teams are going to stick to premium positions more than usual just because of that. But he's no longer like, yeah, run that pick in if you're picking in the 20s. I am even further down on Romello Height. I think, he'll still be good situationally. He'll be good on third down as a pass rusher. But like I said, that designated pass rusher position is narrowing in the NFL. Joshua Josephs narrowly misses the top 10. He hasn't had a great draft process. The traits are excellent. I just think he's in that category of, it depends a lot on the fit, what you're going to get. And I think a lot of what you're going to get isn't necessarily going to come in that rookie year. I moved down Derek Moore a bit, another kind of potential overproduction guy. On the rewatch, wasn't as impressed. I think it was just one of those ones that during the season you watch and you're ready to be impressed, and so then you're impressed. But I don't know, on second watch, not as happy with what I saw there, but still makes the top 15. Moved down on LT Overton. I think I got too excited about him. I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's a true edge so much as a 3-tech who can sometimes line up as a 5-tech, line up as, an outside rusher. I just think some teams are going to see him so much more as an interior player, and so the value's a lot lower. And, his pass rush was never a very deep set of moves, so you do have to keep that in mind. Kieran Crawford, he came onto my radar a little bit later, but he steadily improved this season, despite playing for a program that, had a lot of struggles. I haven't really talked about him, but I think he's explosive off the snap, has a really good punch. He can drop into coverage, which teams are increasingly valuing, and he's very physical. He just needs a deeper pass rush arsenal, which makes sense because the interesting thing about him is he didn't start playing football until his senior year of high school, even though that year he was incredible. And you'll notice I am way lower than consensus on Zion Young. I almost wanted to put him even lower. The reality is I value character concerns a lot, especially when a player is bordering on being a first round pick. And I wouldn't risk a first round pick on someone that I wasn't certain of the character of unless they were a kind of generational talent, and he does not cross that threshold. And, I'm not saying that we have all the facts. I only know what the public knows and all that. But to me, it's just too big of a risk in a class where the cluster of talent that he is in is pretty deep, as in not elite, but will probably develop into a solid NFL player. That range is pretty big, and so to me, there's no reason to take a chance on him, which naturally means he will probably be picked by the Chiefs at 29, because that's how that goes. So those are my thoughts on the edge rushers right now. Let me know what you guys think of my edge rankings, and now I'm going to talk about defensive interior players. Not quite as strong of a position as I had hoped, but starting from the bottom, not 15 players, but 14, I have Zane Durant, 13, Albert Regis, 12, Tim Keenan, 11, Dante Corleone, 10, Rayshon Benny, 9, Xavier Harris, 8, Grayson Halton, 7, Lee Hunter, 6, Daryl Jackson Jr., 5, Dominique Orange, 4, Caleb Banks, 3, Kristen Miller, 2, Kaden McDonald, and 1, Peter Woods. Peter Woods remains at the top. You'll notice that Grayson Halton has now made my top 10. He hadn't previously. I liked the pass rush by the end of the season more than I thought I would. Lee Hunter has moved way up in my rankings, but let's be clear, I am still lower on him than consensus. I admittedly never got the hype. I initially had left him out of my top 10. He did improve throughout the season, and he made some splash plays. I thought the first round hype that he was getting a couple months ago was pretty crazy, and I stand by that, but he still makes my top 10 there at number 7. Albert Regis way down on him than I was before, but I'm still higher on him than consensus. I think the traits are great. I think he plays his best in the biggest games. I still believe in his potential, just not on day 2 like I had initially believed. Tim Keenan stepped up as the year went on. He wasn't initially on my list, but now he's made it. Dominique Orange has shown flashes of pass rush that honestly, I didn't really think that he had. I had thought of him more as just a kind of a big run stuffer guy, but him showing some pass rush potential makes a big difference. Rayshon Benny has made the list. He still is in that category if he needs to land in the right spot, but he has, that run stuffer potential as well. Caleb Banks notably moves down after yet another injury in a weird pre-draft process. As most of you will be aware, Caleb Banks he's the one who we kind of thought, this is a surefire first round pick. The Chargers are going to be one of the landing spots potentially for him. But he had that injury history and he's really big. So an injury history is already like, it's not great, but he has top 15 talent. So that's that. And as the year went on, didn't see as much from him as you would like. And then he gets hurt again. And you just go, yeah, you got hurt at the combine. I don't know that we can risk premium capital on someone who is getting hurt at the defensive interior position. Peter Woods is number one. I had him number one this whole time, but he no longer has a first round grade for me. That may seem a little bit harsh, and I understand he will probably go first round in this draft in particular because this just is a weak class at the top, but he isn't the top 15 type of player that I initially thought he was. I thought maybe he was a top 10 type of player. He's also had a weird pre-draft process, and that's something I've talked about. He showed up really light at the combine, and then he didn't run drills, so it's like, okay, you got a lot lighter, and you don't want to show that makes you more athletic. Maybe you're trying to show some, edge rusher versatility. It's just kind of weird, but he's still someone I believe in, and I think at the right landing spot, he can be one of the better pass rushing defensive tackles in the league. He just needs that right fit. Zane Durant also moves way down. His lack of size seemed to kind of catch up with him as he struggled toward the end of the year, and he particularly seemed to struggle as a run defender. He's more of a 3-tech or even potentially an edge defender than a defensive tackle. I still believe in the skill set. He's just an in-between kind of player, which means he needs to go to a creative defensive coordinator. That's always the case. Anytime someone is an in-between roles kind of player on the defense, it becomes a skill test on how creative is your defensive coordinator. And we see that more and more as more players become these like positionless rovers in the secondary. It's also kind of true on the defensive line when you have someone who has the athleticism to drop back into coverage, but it takes a defensive coordinator who knows how to execute that. So that's kind of the category that I have him in. And then Christian Miller has moved up a bit. He is still somewhat one-dimensional as a player, just being a run stuffer, but for a true nose tackle, that is perfectly fine on most teams because he is so good at what he does. So those are my defensive interior rankings. And then briefly, I want to look at how these guys combine in their rank, meaning top 15 edge rushers, top 14 defensive linemen. How do they compare? So just looking at this group of players, starting at the top, we have David Bailey, Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, Peter Woods, Caden McDonald, TJ Parker, R. Mason Thomas, Kristen Miller, Keldrick Falks. We're kind of going back and forth between edge and defensive interior here. Caleb Banks, Gabe Akis, Zion Young, Cassius Howell, another little run on edge rushers potentially. And then I think there's kind of a big gap right there. And then Dominique Orange, Malachi Lawrence, Daryl Jackson Jr., Lee Hunter, Joshua Josephs, Derek Moore, Grayson Halton, Kieran Crawford, LT Overton, Xavier Harris, Romello Height, and you'll notice that is all of the edge rushers I had in the top 15. So I'm not saying that the rest of the defensive linemen are better than any other edge rushers, just that for the top 15, there's more top 15 the top 15 edge rushers are better overall than the top 15 defensive interior players, not just because of value, but because of how good they are as football players. After that, it's Rayshon Benny, Dante Corleone, Tim Keenan, Albert Regis, and Zane Durant. So with that in mind, the first defensive lineman I have after the first three edge rushers, are pretty close. Peter Woods and Caden McDonald. You would draft them for very different reasons. Do you need a run stopper? Do you need a disruptor in the pass game and even the run game to a certain extent? Only the first 5 in this list are players that I have a first round grade on. And so that is David Bailey, Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, Peter Woods, and Caden McDonald. Everyone after that list don't have a first round grade on. And I think that's worth mentioning because those players will be reached for. And, that means because of this positional value, particularly at edge rushers, they're going to be taken sooner. And if they're taken sooner in the first round, teams might panic in the second round and not want to wait until the third. So a run on edge rushers is very likely. And that is why I think you're not going to be able to get these edge players after the third round. That doesn't mean they're the only players worth drafting. It's a relatively deep edge class in terms of solid players who can make an impact, but I want to know how this compares to your boards and how you guys see this defensive line class. Initially, I thought this was a really good class. Now with the weakness of the defensive interior class, I'm not sure I see it that way. Like I said, there's a lot of edge rushers, but there aren't a lot of star edge rushers. So this is a year where if you're looking for developmental talent, I think that's great. If you need a blue chip edge rusher, you're probably better off trading for someone or having signed a free agent edge rusher. So that's something to keep in mind. Let me know who you think these guys would line up well with in terms of where teams are picking and, where you think most of these guys are going to go. What teams are actually going to prioritize the trenches on the defensive side versus taking a chance that someone is available later. So that being said, this is probably the last thing I post before the draft. Not entirely sure of that, but thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait to check in with you guys after everything settles and we know what next year's teams are going to look like. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you guys being here, and let's go enjoy the draft.